Hey everyone, it is a Tuesday and lots of consequential games in the NHL last night, but as usual, when Russ and I get together, we talk music, so we'll talk a couple minutes of that before we get started with the show. Russ, you weren't here yesterday, but Eric Clapton's 70th birthday was yesterday. I was remarking to Kevin that that officially made me feel really old because, I've grown up watching Clapton through various phases of sobriety and non-sobriety,
Yep.
and it's just weird to think of him as 70 years old. But I got on while I was watching some of the games last night, I was going through some documentary footage on YouTube about him being interviewed, and it's very funny. And we were talking a couple weeks ago about the dynamic between Tony Banks and Peter Gabriel and the sort of like I think dislike there. The hatred between Clapton and he was sort of in the middle, but between Clapton and Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker is just legendary. It's amazing how impactful that the music they produced that came out of such acrimony.
I know it is surprising, but it took them, I want to say almost 35, something like that, years to have a reunion. It was because Ginger Baker's health was bad, I think. And so, it just showed you, and obviously he had a heart in the end and wanted to, raise some funds for him. But yeah, it took forever.
Yeah, if you ever want to watch, and for people out there, if you ever want to watch a documentary called Beware of Mr. Baker, Ginger Baker is one of the strangest cats I've ever seen. Just bizarre. He's living in Africa now, and he's very resentful. And now Jack Bruce is dead, but this was filmed a couple years ago. He's very, very resentful of Jack Bruce because of the fact that Jack Bruce wrote most of the songs, and him and another person got most of the royalties from all the Cream songs. So Clapton doesn't need it because he's Clapton. He's got his own career. But Ginger Baker is a drummer, and Ginger Baker was essentially destitute
Yeah.
because of his problems throughout his life. I'm sure that was part of the reason why he did the reunion tour. But again, the hatred between, the hatred between Bruce and Baker went back to the band they were in before Cream, and it was just like
Was
he
that the
didn't want to.
Yardbirds?
What's that?
Was that the Yardbirds?
No. I can't think of the name of it. Of
Or
course,
that probably.
it'll pop into my head when I'm off the webcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, they that band broke up, and then all of a sudden, you know, Ginger wanted to work with Clapton, and Clapton says, "Hey, how about Jack Bruce?" And it's like, "Oh, great, that's just what I wanted." And for 2 years they were at each other's throats. So that's a common story. I mean, the Beatles were at each other's throats at times. I know that the Gallagher brothers in Oasis were.
Oh, they hate each other at times. Yeah.
It's really and another great documentary on the Eagles. I mean,
Yeah.
Felder and Glenn Fry and Felder and Bernie Ledden, they can't stand each other. They
And I
hate.
got to tell you something very surprising. Last summer, I covered Don Felder. He was with Styx and Foreigner, and Don Felder was great. And you almost do forget how many songs he wrote, how many hits, and that he was the lead guitarist before Joe Walsh. You almost forget all that, and in concert, he was really good.
Yeah. I mean, he's very talented, very and a great guitar player, and him and Walsh work off each other fantastic. The funny thing is, and if you watch this documentary, like the big sticking point was, I mean, he wrote the music for Hotel California, so he gets a lot of
Right.
credit for that. And Henley and Fry give him all the credit for it as well. But I think it was "Victim of Love," which is also on Hotel California. He wanted to sing the song, and they basically said, your voice isn't good enough, and he thought he had some sort of agreement with them that he could sing one song on the album because Walsh could sing and
Mhm.
Randy Meisner could sing and Timothy B. Schmidt could sing, but that was like one instance of the acrimony between all these guys.
It now when he's on tour. That's the funny thing.
Yeah. So
So he wins
um,
in the end.
yeah, that's true. Okay, let's get started. hopefully Kevin will join us. If not, it'll just be me and Russ today. Okay, let me do the intro. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Tuesday, March 31st, 2015.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Agello from HockeyBuzz.com, and this is the HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. Well, Russ, there was a very, very consequential, very busy evening in the NHL last night. I'll start with the Western Conference because that is a sort of a convoluted race of sort of four teams battling for three playoff spots. The Calgary Flames remain hot. They beat Dallas 5-3. Vancouver goes into St. Louis and beats the Blues 4-1. And LA loses in Chicago 4-1. Right now, as it currently stands, Vancouver has 93 points. Calgary has 91 points. The idle Winnipeg Jets have 90 points, and LA have 88. We were talking yesterday how it was, considered a fait accompli or a foregone conclusion that, the Kings were going to make the playoffs. But if you look at it right now, Russ, I mean, they're in trouble. I mean, it's 6 games left, and they're 3 points behind, and Calgary and Vancouver don't seem to show any signs of slowing down.
No, I like Vancouver. I think Vancouver is a team to be reckoned with. I was just talking about Vancouver the other night saying, boy, even if they match up against the Kings, they're going to be a tough out. Now, if they were to play Calgary, I think they'd beat Calgary. So I think right now Vancouver fans have to be sitting pretty. Kings fans are definitely nervous, but until it's down to like those last 2 games, I think they're still going to have that swagger, and they're still going to think the Red Sea is going to part for them, and they're going to get in somehow.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't see that swagger last night in Chicago. And the thing is, Chicago played Scott Darling, and you would have thought.
But he's got a .941 save percentage this year, so let's not even go there. It's not a great name, but for whatever reason, he's doing the job.
I mean, I would seriously doubt that they would go with Scott Darling over Corey Crawford going into the playoffs. But Crawford, if memory serves, he had a really bad game on the weekend. I mean, Darling's sample size isn't exactly small, so I mean,
hot right now. If Crawford were to get hurt, Darling would be the next guy in over Aranta.
Yeah. One interesting note from these series of games, and it's undetermined right now, but Vladimir Tarasenko was injured in the game against Vancouver. NBC reported that he was seen limping in the locker room, and a determination of the severity of the injury will be made today. I'm not going to jump to conclusions here, Russ, because it doesn't sound. I mean, right now it doesn't sound like it's anything serious, but one of the strengths of the Blues is their offensive depth, and to me, one of their weaknesses is their goaltending. Now they give up 4 goals. I know at least one of them was an empty netter, but I think Elliott was in goal last night, and I said to Kevin yesterday that until Elliott wins a playoff series, he's got something to prove to me. But if they lose Tarasenko for any length of time, I think that knocks them down a peg.
It would. I'm not worried about Tarasenko, and I default back to the World Juniors when, and I know Canadians now are going to hate me again, but when Russia came back and beat Canada, and he was a big part of it, he played the whole third period with a dislocated shoulder. And in the locker room, he barely spoke English in those days, and I made it a point to ask him, how bad is your shoulder? And I knew he didn't speak much English, and he just looked at me and went, bad. And I said, hey, you know what? Great job. And he gutted it out. So this is a guy, if there's a Russian stereotype that still exists, and I'm not sure it does, he's not going to fulfill that. He guts it out. So even if he were to miss a game or two, he's playing in the playoffs. I'm not even worried about him. I'm worried about Elliott, though.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, I mean, I know that they went last year and traded for Ryan Miller, and that didn't work out. But I thought that they were going to go more with Jake Allen this year and sort of give him more work so they could prepare him for a playoff run, thinking that he would be the guy. And they've given Elliott more, at least equal work and perhaps more work. And I think they're going to go with Elliott in the playoffs.
Listen, it's Ken Hitchcock. He's always going to go with the veteran.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, maybe the Marty Brodeur thing was, if he was anywhere close to being the Marty Brodeur of old, that would have been the way to go. But I'm surprised that they didn't they didn't go down another road before the season started, because clearly Elliott has been even when Hitchcock had Halak, who he didn't like, he opted for Halak at times over Elliott going into the playoffs, and now he's opting for Elliott, who I don't think is his favorite, over an inexperienced Jake Allen. I mean, I would have thought that they would have been, if there was a possibility of adding a Cam Ward or adding somebody with playoff experience, that they would have gone that direction, but maybe they were gun shy after trading for Miller.
I think they were gun shy. I think, Hitchcock was probably asked the question, can this team win? And, of course, he's going to say yeah, and I think they probably went with it. Jake Allen's pretty good. I don't know if Jake Allen's great, right? And so at the end of the day, and we don't know if Elliott's great, but I've seen some quote-unquote greatness out of him. He was an all-star one year, so he has had his runs. Right now, Jake Allen probably hasn't had enough time to prove that to anybody, but I remember him when he was playing back for Hockey Canada, and I always thought he was really good.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if he'll ever get over the hump of being just really good. And in the NHL, you have to be great in these playoffs if you want to keep advancing. And it would be a tall order for him. So I think you do have to sort of go with Elliott from the start. But look, at some point you can pull Elliott. I mean, it's not like he can't. But again, Allen had his streak, what was it, last year where he won like 12 in a row or something? Or was it 2 years ago? It might have been 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
Yeah. And so he certainly can do it. But again, at the end of the day, this is Ken Hitchcock. I know him very well from when he was here in Philly, and I've even chatted with him before he was in Philly, and he likes his veterans. So it's a moot point to me.
Yeah. Going to the East, the big game of the night was Tampa Bay and Montreal. Pretty wild affair at the Bell Center. Tampa Bay wins 5-3. Now, I watched a lot of this game, and it seemed that every time Montreal scored or did something positive, Tampa came right back and responded and got a goal. Nemestikov, the young Russian center, he scored a couple goals, looked really impressive. Thing was that they didn't get a lot out of Stamkos in that game, and they still won sort of going away. Montreal, to me, again, I think that their sort of lack of offense, other than the guys like Pacioretty and Desharnais, is going to be their Achilles heel. The one concern now, Tampa swept Montreal. I think it was all 5 games. They swept them 5 in the season, which is, I don't think any other team has swept the Canadiens this year. Tampa was completely impressive, but they did lose another defenseman. Victor Hedman got hurt in the third period. He's apparently questionable for tonight's game in Toronto, which is going to be an important game for Tampa because they're only 1 point behind Montreal in the Atlantic, and I think they're either tied or 1 point behind the Rangers for the overall lead in the Eastern Conference. Russ, the injury problems, especially on the defense, if Hedman is out long term, and it doesn't sound like he is going to be a problem. But you look at their defense right now, if Hedman doesn't play tonight, it's 3 rookies, and your top 2 defensemen are Strawman and Matt Carle. That's a problem.
Yeah, it's funny too because, again, if we rewind Anton Strawman when he was first with the Rangers a couple years ago, not last year, he was basically pegged as an offensive defenseman because that was last we saw him. That's what he was. And that sort of didn't work out initially with the Rangers. Then all of a sudden they put him in the shutdown role. They got to the Stanley Cup. They don't have him now, and he is playing great in Tampa in that role. He's still terrific. But, yeah, it's not enough defense. They need Hedman. They also need Garrison back. They also need Tyler Johnson back. I don't think they're going to beat anybody beyond the first round if they're not at full strength because we don't know if Bishop will stay healthy. I mean, I hope he does. He's a great guy. I think he's a terrific goalie. But he's got to actually stay healthy, too, because that was their big problem last year. So it's hard to get invested in this team. Now, I like Nemestikov a lot, too. I hung out with him during the NHLPA event over the summer. I got to talk to him. I watched him sort of like show up his skills a little bit for fun. And he is a highly skilled guy, always was. And I think he is starting to mature and turn into that player. All that said, this is sort of, to me, like the same argument we used to do with the Devils. This is Carey Price's best year. Montreal can't score. I heard Dennis Potvin say it on SiriusXM today. Montreal can't score. Well, they scored 3 goals. So if Tampa doesn't score 5, they're going to win most games when they score 3 goals with Price and net. This just happens to be one of them that they didn't, but he still made 39 saves. And, so I look at the end of the day, if Carey Price is near perfect in the playoffs, which he could be, I'm not worried about Montreal because then I think they need to score 2.5 goals average a game.
Well, he looked mere mortal yesterday. I mean, the Nemestikov breakaway, and then Drouin scored only his third goal of the season and he scored it almost on the same way that Nemestikov did. So it was, I mean, maybe they just have Price's number, and that some goaltenders.
They could have his number, and it could just be a little fatigue right this time of the year, and maybe he needs to sort of move past that. A bad game. I mean, if we talk about Anaheim, I was at that Ranger game where they gave up 7. They're not going to give up 7 the rest of the year, but they gave up 7 that game, and it was unbelievable. So I think we're going to see some up and down movement with teams tiring a little bit, and then they have to sort of kick in that extra gear for the playoffs. And look, even the Rangers, I mean, they've slipped a little. I think all these teams it could happen to them, even the ones on top. But we're all talking about Montreal like they're mortal and they're this and they're that, and then they still have 102 points.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. Their season, they've had a fantastic.
Not like Canadians fans. That's what we actually sound like.
Well, yeah. That's well, you'll never confuse me with a Montreal fan.
No.
But looking at Tampa Bay though, it's like, I mean, and like I said, I mean, if Hedman is questionable for tonight, that means it's not a serious injury. It's more of a day-to-day thing. But right now, they're without Hedman, they're without Colburn, they're without Garrison, and they're without Schuster. So, I mean, and I know that they've got a playoff spot locked, but if they want to finish first in the Atlantic or first in the East, I mean, they're going to have to beat a team like Toronto tonight, who, they won on Saturday, but they had lost 7 in a row with a rather inexperienced defense. And they're probably going to go with Vasilevsky in goal, I would assume.
I would.
Bishop a couple games in a row.
Yeah.
But the teams in the East, and we just talked about Montreal, there are major flaws. Now, I think the flaw with Tampa is their defense, not just the injuries, but Yzerman has made most of his acquisitions on the blue line to try to plug that hole, and I think he did it effectively. But now injuries have reared their ugly head. Montreal, it's been scoring, and I'll continue to champion that because I think in the end it's going to kill them. With the Rangers, I know that you had some point that you want to bring up with them. It seems to be teams that possess the puck.
Yeah, it's big teams, but it's more than that because some people just think, oh, well, it's big teams punish them like the Kings, and they do this and that, but it's more than that. It is puck possession, and I don't want to get crazy with the advanced stats, and I don't have the numbers to back this one up, but if you ask me who their best puck possession guy on the team is, it's Matt Zuccarello, the smallest guy with the biggest stick. But he always has the puck, and he's always controlling it in the corners. Rick Nash, he's only controlling it on breakaways. They're a fast strike team, right? They try a lot of stretch passes. They have a lot of speed. They'll try and get, opportunistic, but they never control the play. They really don't. And for moments they will, in parts of the game, but they don't dominate holding the puck. And they're not like John Tortorella where they're going to play in their own end the whole game either, which is always tough to watch because it's like, you're just waiting for a mistake, and Lundqvist is just getting peppered. It's not like that, but they still don't possess the puck enough, and they still are a little iffy on the stretch passes when there's too many of them. And Keith Yandel, frankly, has been trying too many of them. I mean, he's not fit in yet the way they'd hoped. I'll hold out some hope that maybe he can. But look, I mean, right now, he's sort of going down that path of like a Bruce Driver and other guys that the Rangers had gotten that they had hopes for and didn't work out. And this was a big gamble, a big one, because, Martin St. Louis, in all intents and purposes, will be back next year. But if they would have had Anthony Duclair, then they wouldn't have been locked into bringing St. Louis back in case all of a sudden there was a Capageddon. Well, now they have to bring St. Louis back because there is no one who could take that spot. There would have been if you had a Duclair plus the draft pick, right? So this is a big deal for Yandel, and right now, him and Boyle, this was my worry. Dan Boyle is not the same. We all know that. But Yandel and Boyle play almost the same game. Neither of them are good in their own end. Both of them were very effective with the puck, good passers. Boyle now can't finish like he used to be able to finish. Now he's starting to miss on a lot of shots. So now you have two guys that sort of mirror each other that it's really not Leach and Zubov. That's really what I'm sort of getting at.
Now the question is, and I know that some Ranger fans pointed to this on the weekend. Lundqvist comes back after missing, what was it, 5 or 6 weeks?
6 weeks, yeah.
6 weeks, and looked pretty rusty against the Bruins in the first period, giving up 3 goals. I thought he got a little better as the game went along, but now, and I believe they're gonna play Talbot the next game. I don't even
I
know
heard.
when it is. Yeah, but I mean,
It's tonight against the Jets.
yeah, and I mean, that's going to be a big game for Winnipeg. So going with Talbot, I mean, the question is, I mean, is there any? I mean, I think that it's a no doubter. They're going to go with Lundqvist, but is there? I mean, if he struggles, do you think they hesitate to go to Talbot if in a playoff situation?
I think they would hesitate. I really think that it would cause big problems depending on when it happens and how it happens. If you're down 0-2 in a series and he's given up 10 goals, then maybe we could have this discussion. If he's losing games and he's losing them 3-2 or even 4-2, no. You can't do it because you still have to look at the future, and Cam Talbot will be gone next year. There's no way they can keep him. They're not going to be able to re-sign him. They'll have him for either the whole year next year and he'll walk, or they'll have him for most of the year and they'll trade him. And so at the end of the day, Lundqvist is your guy. And when you push that button, Alain Vigneault's not going anywhere. And he's going to have to work with that same player the next year. And so I think that this is a big deal. And Denny Potvin, same discussion, was alluding to what you're talking about. Like, hey, we don't know about Lundqvist, but we have Talbot. And I would say just the opposite. We don't know what Talbot's going to do in the playoffs. He's never played in the playoffs. But we know what Lundqvist can do. And when you're rusty, you're rusty. I mean, perfect example, I hit the batting cage like 2 weeks ago. I hadn't swung all winter. You want to talk about rusty? My first 3 or 4 swings were awful. So just imagine a goalie of his eliteness, for a new word, at his level, and all of a sudden he's got to get in there and face it. He wasn't even – here's the other thing, too, that I think people have forgotten, especially the Talbot lovers and the Lundqvist haters. And by the way, they're all Ranger fans. That's the sad part of that. He missed a lot of practices because his wife was pregnant. He couldn't even – I think he hit 1 practice before that game. So if it was 2, it was 2. I mean real practices, too, not just sort of skating around. So at the end of the day, I think we got to cut this guy a break. And if the Rangers don't win the President's Trophy, so be it. And if Lundqvist is fine by the end of that run and they're still a pretty good playoff position, which they will, that's what you have to worry about. You don't worry about the President's Trophy. That's what these fans are worried about. In 91, 92, they won the President's Trophy with Roger Nielsen out in the first round. Now, in 94, they won the President's Trophy and they won, but that's a whole better team if you ask me. This is a really good team, still not to the level of the 94 team.
Yeah, and there's 8.5 million reasons why they'd start Lundqvist. I mean, in 7 more years, his contract is up to 2021. So, I mean, Talbot's done a fine job, and he should get a lot of credit, and he's probably going to earn a lot of money.
Lundqvist is expected to go tonight now, they're saying. So
okay, so I mean, hey, right now I don't think they have first place locked, but they're in a good position. They've got to get Lundqvist back on track. So maybe. So okay, one other result from last night, actually a couple other results that have an effect on the other side of the standings.
Huh.
The focal point of of Western New York, of Erie County, and scant few in Arizona, the Battle of the Tanks.
Who's expecting more snow in Erie? They had a big deal, made it on the news today. So sorry, Erie, enjoy the snow.
No, thank you. But the Battle of the Tanks was won by the Sabres. They win 4-1 in Arizona. With 6 games left to go, the Sabres lead for the McEichel Cup by 4 points. Arizona has 54. Edmonton has been hot of late, and they're now at 59, which gives hope to Leafs Nation, Tank Nation, which is at 62, that Edmonton can overcome the Leafs and put the Leafs in the 3rd draft slot. To me, Russ, I think Edmonton. I don't know if it's a run to sort of get Todd Nelson the coaching job, because a lot of these players played with Todd Nelson in Oklahoma City during the lockout, and they played well there. And I think Edmonton has played better since he replaced Dallas Eakins. So I mean, maybe this is that young group sort of getting motivated to make a case for Nelson being named the full-time coach. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's just not having Dallas Eakins. I think he sucked the life out of him with that whole system and the way he was running them around in practice. And I every game I saw them, and it wasn't like I watched every game or I attended every game live, but for 2 years straight, anytime he came through Philly, which is only once a year, they were the same. They were not better, and they were worse. And you could just see how they were running around, especially in their own end. So now they're playing better, and miraculously, no one talks about trading Nail Yakupov anymore because he's back to scoring, because he's finally got a coach that understands how he's supposed to play and his limitations. And all of a sudden, Jordan Eberle's scoring. So now there's no talk about trading Jordan Eberle. And Taylor Hall, when he's healthy, is scoring. And so now there's not as much worry about, well, what if we get the first pick? They do want to sort of keep this coach and keep any momentum they have going. I think that's more important than the first pick because they've had those. Now they need to get to that next spot. Look, they're going to have a top 5 pick anyhow, most likely. Right. So they're in good shape. But they need to prove to their fan base that they are moving in the right direction, because if they don't, then it's going to be another situation where if they did get another first-round pick and they didn't have production, everybody's going to look at Mac T and say, what's going on here?
Yeah. I mean, the funny thing is that the most valuable pickup that they made was Derek Roy, because Derek Roy has played well with Yakupov, and he probably would be willing to stay in Edmonton. He gives them, a veteran presence up the middle. I mean, he's not a great center anymore, but he's okay. And
Speed, skill, and good stick handler, yeah.
Right, and he allows them to maybe take it slow with a guy like Draisaitl and not have to force him in next year if he's not ready. Now, he played a sizable chunk in the league this year and then got sent back to junior to avoid having the 1 year elapse for unrestricted free agency. So, I mean, we'll see what he does in training camp next year. But
actually, they'll probably go one better. They'll send him to the World Championships again and see how he plays there.
Yeah. But the funny thing is, and I was talking to a veteran reporter in Toronto on Saturday at the Leafs game, and he mentioned to me, he says, all this battling, the McEichel, the Sabre fans booing, or Sabre fans cheering for the Arizona Coyotes last Thursday. He said that this has made this season one of the least enjoyable seasons that he has covered in recent memory. I don't know. Maybe because I'm newer to the game. I mean, and it's easier for me to remember back to being more of a fan. But I mean, I understand the fan base in Buffalo. I understand the fan base in Toronto. At a certain point when the games don't have consequence for making the playoffs, that they want their team to not win to better their position. It's, it doesn't exactly make for a pleasant atmosphere. I was at a Leafs Blues game a few weeks ago, and when the Blues scored like 3 goals in the first period, the fans were sort of like, okay, good, there you go, it's perfect. I don't, it's a reality. I mean, the way the system is set up and the way it's going to be set up, the way the lottery is set up this year and going forward, we're still going to have this if the draft is as strong as it is this year.
Look, I mean, there's no Corey Cross to boo, so that's a plus. I just look at it like this. I always look at it from the prospect side out, and from that side of things, it's fun to watch down the stretch them to bring guys like Bailey in, like you talked about, and see, let some of these guys get playing time, let them see who's going to challenge for a spot next year. I'm looking at that more than I'm looking at, look at the record, now I got to find, and I challenge beat writers, learn more about prospects. Write more about them when the team's going bad. Don't always focus on what's going bad. It's bad. Now focus on what could make them better and write about that the last 6 games. That's what I would do, because at the end of the day, then you're still sort of keeping your readers happy rather than depressing them.
I mean, there's a reason for optimism if you are a fan of Arizona or a fan of Buffalo, not only because of Eichel or McDavid or Hannafin, but because of the prospects in those organizations. I mean, you look at Arizona with Dvorak and with Domi and
player that we talked about.
Yeah, I mean, you've got and they have Gormley and Murphy on defense. I mean, they have some good prospects, and we've talked ad nauseum about Buffalo's prospects, how deep and talented they are, and I think that gives them a lot of flexibility to maybe go out and make some trades because they might want more immediate help to help.
And Murphy's over his injury problems too. I interviewed him a few weeks ago, and he looks great. And if that kid stays healthy, he is going to be a terrific addition for them. And so you're right. I look at that and I stay optimistic, but I would still be optimistic for the Leafs in the sense that Okay, let's do the controversy for a minute because at every opportunity, Don Cherry will just kill the NCAA because there's no Canadians. It's really that simple. If there were a ton of Canadians, I mean, there's not none. There's a few. There's always a few. But the idea is, if it comes down to Don Cherry and he doesn't know the talent level of the two players, and you say, Don, this kid's from Oakville, Ontario, or this kid is from Massapequa, New York, he's going to say, well, you should play the kid from Oakville, Ontario.
Right.
And in this case, he's wrong because and I know you listened to the Dave Morrison interview. I don't know if we talked about Connor Brown that go round, but we did talk about him before that. He still has work to be done, strength-wise, defense-wise. Where on the other hand, yeah, maybe you are burning in a year of ELC on Bailey, but you're getting a kid fresh out of college, a little bit more built as far as physical play and mentally. And so, yeah, throw him in there and see, because next year he's going to play. And Connor Brown, you don't know if he's going to play. And I watched Brown in Erie, and he didn't play a lick of defense. He was just piling on points with McDavid and Strome, and everything was great. But every time somebody would say something to me next to me about, oh, look at Connor Brown, how great he is, I was looking at Strome and Brown because I was like, at the end of the day, I sort of deduced, hey, Brown does have a scoring touch, but there's other things you have to do to get to the NHL.
He's improved on defense, but I think his area in need of improvement is just to get stronger, and you know, and I think that'll happen. But the Leafs are not going to rush Connor Brown. I don't think they're going to rush William Nylander. But the funny thing is that and I've watched Don Cherry since I was a kid, so and I have the utmost of respect for him. But the thing that he doesn't understand when it comes to Casey Bailey and it comes to guys like Kyle Baun who are signed by Chicago. It was part of the agreement that they burned the first year of that contract. So that was the whole point of it. So it's not a meritocracy here in terms of Casey Bailey jumping the gun and he shouldn't get the chance to play because he's a college guy and that the Leafs love college guys. It's the fact that it was part of the deal to get a guy who had a lot of choices to play with a lot of teams where he wanted to go, and that was the price that they had to pay.
I would just say, hey Don, wasn't Jonathan Taves a college guy?
Yeah. How about the funny thing is, and he made an insinuation, and he was talking about the Leafs top line who have played horribly, that they're all college guys, and then there was an American reference, and last time I looked, let me ask, is Regina in Wisconsin? Because that's where Tyler Bozak is from. He's from Saskatchewan, so. Right. But anyway, let's just I'll save the coaching comparative till tomorrow. I wanted to, since we're both here, let's talk about the tactical thing for the draft, because right now Buffalo is in the lead, and I think if they lose 4 games, or it's a combination of 4 losses between Arizona, or wins for Arizona, losses for Buffalo, a combination of that, and Buffalo gets the first pick. If Buffalo gets the first pick, they're guaranteed Eichel. If they lose the lottery, if they win the lottery, obviously it's McDavid. So I think either they're going to pick Eichel at number 2. They're going to pick McDavid at number 1. There's no mystery there.
No.
If Arizona finishes last, they will do the same. What seems to be the hinge of where things go is the 3rd pick.
Mm-hmm.
In me looking at things, if Arizona picks 3, and I talked to somebody again on Saturday who said that Arizona likes Strome.
Mm-hmm.
And that, now I look at them and I know that they have Murphy, I know that they have Gormley, I know that they have Ekman Larson, who's only 24 years old, but I would think that they would want a guy who could be a top pairing defenseman. But according to what I heard, they like Strome, and they would maybe take Strome number 3 over Hanifin. If it's Edmonton,
I told you they weren't going to go defense either. I remember we chatted about that, and that wasn't my sense that they would automatically do that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's the fact that I'm hoping they would, but I looked at their rosters and I thought they were deeper at forward than on defense, and that Hanifin being ranked 3rd, meant that they would go that way.
But you know what they're not deep at? Top line center.
Yeah, well, who is? And
that's the trump card here.
Yeah. Now Edmonton, if they pick 3rd, and right now, like if Buffalo or Arizona won the lottery, and the chance of that would be, I think, 33.5%. Edmonton would pick 3rd. I'm reasonably confident Edmonton would take Hannafin.
Yeah, I'm going to say 90% confident because there's that 10% in Edmonton where I sometimes shake my head. So I'm going to go 90% confident.
Now, the funny thing was, I, I think, and I think most people who observe the Leafs think that Strome would be the pick if they had the fourth pick. But the thing that's concerning, and not concerning in a negative way, but just for those people who think Strome is the guy, is that Mark Hunter is part of the Leafs management staff, and Mark Hunter was responsible for drafting Mitch Marner with the London Knights. And Mitch Marner had a fantastic season in the Ontario Hockey League. I just think he projects more as an NHL winger than he does as an NHL center. He played wing in the top.
Right, at least to start, because he won't be there first year, right?
Right.
Maybe he gets there second or third year. Maybe he's 175 pounds then. He's like 160-something now. That's on the edge of being able to win or lose faceoffs. And so he probably starts out on the wing. I agree with you. And then we'll see if he ever moves into center. One of the big, I don't want to call it hoaxes, but funny parts about the draft is all of a sudden on draft day, everybody's a center, right? Because teams are looking for centers. But not everybody ends up at center.
Yeah.
And that's, so I understand your conversation about that. And I think Strome would be better for them. I think Mark Hunter is just a voice in the room.
Yeah.
And I think that's important to remember, too. Now, again, talking about that voice in the room, we talked about Lundqvist, right? There was that voice that kept pushing for Lundqvist since the first round, and they finally took him at the end of the draft. Mark Hunter may do the same thing for Mitch Marner, and he still may not get Mitch Marner. So I wouldn't put too much stock into that. I think at the end of the day, they will look at Strome, and if they decide that he could be tougher on the puck than a James Van Riemsdyk, then they're going to take him, because that's always been the knock on Van Riemsdyk, right? Big guy, but he's a finesse player, and I heard it all in Philly. Still a terrific player.
Yeah.
But you want a tougher guy if he's a 6'3", and Strome's got room to put on some bulk, and he'll be over 200 pounds, I'm sure.
The only thing is I'm convinced after studying and looking at the top end of the first round that the only and there's always room for one guy who you don't expect to make the NHL as an 18-year-old. I only expect McDavid and Eichel to play in the NHL as an 18-year-old. I don't think Strome, if Toronto drafts Strome or Toronto drafts Marner, they're going back to Erie and they're going back to London. I think there's no way in hell that either one of them would play for the Leafs next year. The only 18-year-old who would play for the Leafs next year would be Connor McDavid.
But we also would have expected Pasternak playing this year. Sure. And last year he wasn't one of the guys that I would pick. Ekblad was one of them, and Draisaitl was the other, and they were the only ones, and they both played, and Draisaitl didn't stick, but he still played, right? If you ask me, it's definitely McDavid. It's not even a question. There's a question with Jack Eichel, because there's two things. Because he's a college player, you can't send him to the AHL because then he's a pro, right? Can't even play preseason for the NHL because then he's a pro. So either he has to go to the CHL or the NHL. And they have to make that decision before college camp breaks and before he signs or doesn't sign. And so I happen to think there's a chance that Jack Eichel doesn't start the year in the NHL and does actually play in the CHL. I don't know this. This is just total hypothesis, but I see a few flaws in his game that I think he needs a little work on before he plays at the NHL level. And there's not many flaws for Jack Eichel, trust me. But teams have been able to neutralize him a little bit in the college hockey championships, heading down to the Frozen Four now. So we'll see. If he overcomes down the Frozen Four, this whole conversation's moot. But I think there is a thought that he may not. Ivan Provorov is the guy that I think can play in the NHL next year. I think he is ready. He has very few flaws in his game. He's physically ready. And so I think he's the one. And I think the guy that gets overlooked, and some of the people on Hockey Buzz killed me, because Pavel Zacha, we got to see what he does in the World Championship, in the under-18s, because in the World Juniors, they had him playing a role on a bad team. And so it wasn't really a great way to sort of show off all of his talents. But at the end of the day, he is another huge winger, and if he looks like he is going to be a big-time scoring winger, I think he's going to surprise people and go higher than they think, and he'll go ahead of Mitch Marner. I think at the end of the day, if I'm a GM and I think that Zacha could possibly get into that 70, 80-point range, well, nobody gets 80 anymore, so let's talk 70, because only Crosby and maybe one other player, maybe Voracek will hit 80 this year, which is crazy. So 65, 70 point range, I might have to think about Zacha because Marner, I think he could get there. Just like Goudreau's got 22 goals, and I think there's, some similarities there, a few. But sometimes they're going to go for size, and that's where sometimes a smaller guy can drop a little bit. Points are points. Again, I've seen some crazy articles that are sort of like, I saw one on Travis Sanheim recently trying to figure out equating what his WHL points would equate to in the NHL, and looking at it, you can't. There's no comparables there. You can't go by points in any league. You go look at the Q, and points are higher than any other league most of the time, except for McDavid, of course, and a few guys. But on average, there's a lot of crazy point totals in the Q, and all of a sudden those guys come to the NHL and they drop tremendously. Scouts know this, teams know this, but I don't think all fans know it and all writers know it, and I think that's something to sort of keep in check, because you can go back and look, and there are some guys, especially in their over-age years, that score big points in juniors and then never get close to it in the NHL.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple players right now, and I'm not going to pretend to be like an expert on them, but when I look at different draft lists and I see Lawson Crouse ranked 6th in one, and then in the teens in another, and a guy like Zach Werenski, who I've heard some people say is better than Hanifin, and then some people say he's not close to being as good as Hanifin. There's a lot of wiggle room in this draft. There's going to be guys who go up and who go down, and it's all going to depend on the preference of the teams in the certain positions.
I mean, I like Werenski a lot. I don't think he'll have the same kind of offense that Hanifin does. I just don't think it's possible. I think he'll have offense, but I don't think it'll be the same. And I don't think he can make the end rushes that Hanifin can. And he's already starting to show it, and it will take a few more years until he can really put that all together. But I think he will put that all together because he is really tall and rangy. I like Werenski a lot. He'll probably be a super solid defenseman who gets, like 35, 40 points. But, you're looking at a guy like Hanifin who can get 50, 55. And so I think that's the difference between those two. And I'm the guy who puts Crouse in the teens because I've watched his games. And, again, when you're a big, imposing guy in junior hockey, you can get a lot of points.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't get a ton of points in the World Juniors, however. And so then I sort of look at that and I say, okay, so there's the positives and then there's the negatives. And then I look at the pink unicorn, which is the power forward in the NHL period. And if you go back and look at drafts for power forwards, it's tough. I mean, right now Stefan Matteau's having trouble. Now maybe he'll come out of that.
Tyler Biggs.
Yeah, Tyler Biggs. That's a tough one. We could come up with a huge list easy.
Yeah. Well, we don't know what Ritchie's going to be.
He was the next one on my list. Nick Ritchie. All of a sudden, I'm not as high in him as I was a year ago, and so we'll see.
Yeah,
that's a tough thing, and that's even scouts will tell you they know when they're drafting these guys that is the biggest if.
Yeah,
power forward.
Yeah, I know, and it just seems now, and the guy I saw Crouse at the top prospects game, and other than a couple nice checks, he really didn't impress me all that much.
He is great defensively. He is.
Yes. Yeah, but if you're talking about a top 7 or 8 pick,
Where was Gauthier picked?
What's Freddie Gauthier, 23rd, I believe, in the first round.
That's probably where he should go in a draft like this. He won't. He's going to go much higher. But that's when I said I could understand why the Leafs drafted him there, because we know he's going to be a shutdown defensive guy. He's not going to score points in the NHL. Nothing. And so Crouse maybe scores a few more than a guy like Gauthier, and I think he's different than him, but I don't think there's a big difference.
I think Lawson Crouse is the next Marcus Foligno. That's what I think. Similar body types, similar aggressive styles. Mm-hmm. I think he'll score in double figures in goals, but I don't think he's going to be a 30-goal scorer. I don't think he's going to be a Milan Lucic. And I'm not trying to make judgments on a kid who's 17 years old.
No, me neither. But if you ask me, do I like Kirby Reichel better than I like Lawson Crouse? I'm going to go with Reichel.
Yeah, I mean, I know that looking and we'll end the show and do our draft simulator in a second here, but I know that the one guy who really opened my eyes at the top prospect game, and he's had a pretty good year, in junior with the Ottawa 67s is Travis Konechny. And I know that he was ranked in the 20s, and I think his stock is probably going up a little bit, even though he's small, but his skill set is pretty special.
Yeah, if you have the right skill set, teams aren't scared off at small as much as they used to be. But you do have to have that right skill set. So it was good that you brought that up, because if you're small but you're not exceptional with the puck, and they almost don't care, like, are you going to be an exceptional scorer? It's really, are you an exceptional skater, are you elusive, and are you great with the puck? Because usually the scoring will come too. If you answer yes to all those, then he's moving up in the draft, and he probably will.
Yeah. Okay, we will touch on the things I was going to talk about, the Vegas situation. Apparently, the potential owner of the Vegas franchise is making some hints that the NHL will making an announcement in the next month. We'll talk about that tomorrow. And the list of coaching vacancies, which is more desirable than least desirable amongst a number of teams. Some big games tonight. We have the Bruins playing the Florida Panthers at the TD Garden in Boston. Florida trails Boston by 4 points. They play the Bruins twice in the remaining 6 games. Ottawa has a game in hand. They play Detroit tonight, so they won't use up the game in hand.
No.
But Russ, this is a battle. I mean, I think that Boston did themselves, pretty well winning those 2 games on the weekend, and Ottawa stumbled, and Florida's still there, even though they lost Bukestad. They earned 3 of a possible 4 points. I think Florida has to win in Boston if they're going to hope to catch them.
They do, and Rask seems to not be that hurt, so I think he's going to play well enough. So I think they'll win that game, but you never know. I mean, if Yager all of a sudden turns it on like he did a couple games ago, Florida could win that game. So that's going to be a tough one. I agree. I think we should wish Gordie Howe a happy 87th.
Yeah, I was gonna get to that, and yes,
I hear he's out fishing today for catfish.
Yeah, isn't that unbelievable? I don't remember if it was October or November when he had the stroke, and all I know is that I was like really touched by, and it was Keith Olbermann on ESPN who did a fantastic,
He did,
honoring of Gordie Howe, and ever since then he's bounced back. And I saw him at some event in Saskatchewan last month.
Yeah, they said that was going to be his last public event because they were honoring a bunch of guys, including him. But it's because of the stem cells, and he had to go to Mexico for that.
Yeah.
That's I'm kind of hoping in the U.S. that changes, because if nothing else, he could be looked at as a case study in a very positive light.
Yeah, and he's not. I mean, I had members of my family who had a stroke, and it did affect their ability. He seemed to be still there. I mean, he's 87 years old, and we all know that when
he got some limitations now. I talked to Mark Howe, and he gives me updates when I see him at Flyers games, and he has limitations. Hey, but if he's out fishing today, that is tremendous.
Yeah. Hey, so happy 87th birthday to Gordie Howe, and also a happy 83rd birthday to Stan the Maven Fischler.
Yep.
Who's always been in the in media circles for as long as I've been living. So happy 83rd birthday to him. Let's do the NHL Draft Simulator. I'll press the button here and do the official drum roll. Ginger Baker doing the drum roll. And the winner is the Dallas Stars.
Wow.
I think the Dallas Stars would be one of the teams that would least need Connor McDavid, with Sagan and Spezza up the middle. But I'm sure
I'd put him on the wing, and I'd put him with those guys first year.
Yeah, I mean, McDavid on the left wing with Sagan and Jamie Benn. There you go. That would be a rather entertaining line. I think Dallas needs some defense, so they give Dave Nonis a call about Dion Phaneuf. He should maybe you can make a deal.
All right.
Okay, Russ. For Russ Cohen, this is Michael Agello of HockeyBuzz.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.